Good evening, and welcome to What's Your Story? My guest tonight is David Graham. Do you have a BFF, a best friend forever? Think about all the fun that you had with your best friend. Think about all the wonderful experiences that you shared together. Imagine waking up one morning and discovering that you had killed your best friend. Imagine the pain, shock, and horror. Then imagine being convicted and sent to prison. My guest has lived that nightmare. Welcome again to the show, David. In part one, we talked about the accident, your recollections of it, the reaction of the family of the individual who was killed, your best friend, Matt. And we talked about you coming to grips with the fact that you were discovered and are living with the fact that your actions cost the life of not only another human being, but somebody very, very close to you. And I said to you off camera how courageous I think you are to be here to do that. And I felt it's equally important to say on camera how courageous I believe you are to come here and talk about that. Not everybody would do that, and I commend you for that.
Oh, thank you.
Now, we're going to talk about prison and what charges were brought against you as a result of the accident?
So when I was first arrested, I was originally charged with one count of first-degree manslaughter for Matt's death and 2 counts of first-degree assault. One of those assault charges was for the injuries to Andrew, but there was one person in the Corolla that I hit, and like a 6-year-old woman, and she suffered very bad injuries as well. She ended up being in intensive care, but made a full recovery. So I was, I had an assault charge for that as well. And in the end, I took a plea deal. And my lawyer was able to, make a deal with the prosecutor and the judge, and they reduced my charges to 1 count of misconduct with a motor vehicle for Matt's death, and then 2 counts of second-degree assault. And each of those charges carried a 5-year prison sentence. And so my official sentence was 15 years in prison, suspended after 2, with 5 years probation. And so I took the deal because I wasn't going to go to trial.
Now, the accident happened in May and you were arrested in September, is that right?
Correct.
All right. Tell us how and where and what you were doing when the police actually showed up to arrest you.
Well, so I was actually in New Jersey because I had gone back to New Jersey to do my student teaching, which was all that I had left before graduating. And so I actually got a call. I had a job opposite my student teaching working as a lane mechanic at a bowling alley. And so it was the last Saturday night in September of 2005, and I got a call from one of the officers who was investigating my crash. And they had said that a warrant has been issued for your arrest and you need to drive home and turn yourself in immediately.
How did that grab you? Were you expecting that?
To be honest with you, I was actually shocked that I was able to go back to New Jersey to start my student teaching before it happened, because I didn't know if they were gonna, they told me that it would take months, but they said that it could take a couple months or it could take a whole bunch of months, that they weren't sure. And so I was just ready for it, waiting for it. And so I wasn't shocked when they called. I was a little bit shocked when they told me that I needed to drive home immediately and turn myself in. So I went to my boss's office that night. I told him that I needed to drive home and I wasn't sure if I was coming back. And then I made my way home to East Windsor, Connecticut. And then the next morning, went to East Windsor Police Department and turned myself in. and they made me take my shoes off as I was walking in. They took my fingerprints. They took a couple mug shots, one from the front and one from the side, and then they put me in a cell. I guess they were, still figuring out the last details or whatever. So I was in there for a little while. I can't remember how long, but I remember that I was freezing, and they gave me like a yellow blanket thing that wasn't really a blanket, and then they took me out and they sat me down at a desk, and that's when they told me the charges that I was facing, and they told me my bail, which was originally $250,000.
Okay.
But I guess in the conversation that I had with that police officer the night before, I guess he had given me some information that was not accurate, and so as a result, they actually lowered my bail to $25,000. And I had to come up with 10% of that in order to keep myself out of prison until I was sentenced, which was $2,500. So posted $2,500 and went back to New Jersey and completed my student teaching. And it was 3 days after I graduated. It was January of 2006. That's when that was when I had my first court date for my criminal case.
Tell us about that. How did that go?
I showed up, I had no idea what to expect, and I met with my lawyer 5 minutes before I was supposed to go up in front of the judge, and he said, "We're gonna ask for a continuance." And I said, "What's a continuance?" And he said that, it's just gonna give us more time, me more time to prepare and to have conversations with the prosecutor and with the judge. And so I showed up the next few months, kept being continued. And then I showed up to court in May, and the judge told me that, my attorney told me that he and the judge and the prosecutor, that over the next few months that they were gonna meet to try to come up with a deal for me. And then I showed up to court the next month, and I went into a room with my lawyer, and he said, the three of us met, we came up with a deal, just take it, because there's no way you'd survive a trial. And so I took the deal.
Okay. Restate for the audience what the deal was again, please.
Which was, they reduced my charges to 1 count of misconduct with the motor vehicle and 2 counts of second-degree assault, and that my sentence would be 15 years in prison, suspended after 2, with 5 years probation.
So how much actual jail time did you have to do?
I ended up serving 10 months.
10 months in jail.
Yes.
Tell us about the day you reported to prison.
So the day that I was sentenced,
what day was that?
That was June 6th. I believe it was June 6th or June 7th of 2007. And so I showed up to Enfield Superior Court, and I was sentenced. And once I was sentenced, I was taken by the arm. I was brought into the back of Enfield Superior Court, and they actually let me see my parents. They kind of shuffled me over to a room, and I was there, and there was glass in front of me, and on the other side of the glass, there were my parents, and I started talking to the both of them, and I just remember my dad walked out of the room probably, I don't know, like a minute or two after I was there, and I was talking with my mom. And then after that, they took me and they put me in a cell. I was there for about, I'd say, 4 hours or so. Longest 4 hours of my life.
Absolutely.
And then they took me out of a cell. They lined me up. They put 4 of us in a line, and they chained us by one hand and 1 foot, and we were all chained together, and we were shuffled, and we were shuffled into the back of a armored car and brought to Hartford County Correctional, the Meadows. When I got there, I was strip searched. They gave me 2 pairs of white boxers, 2 pairs of white socks, 2 white t-shirts, and 2 sets of tan tops and bottoms. They took my mugshot. I was given a government bologna sandwich, and then they took me into a cell, where I sat. There was, I think, like, I don't know, 5 or 6 other inmates that were there, and they gave us a piece of paper. They gave us each a piece of paper and a pencil for us all to share. And they said, whatever phone numbers that you know now, write them all down now, because it's going to be the numbers to go on your calling list. And you won't know, the next time you'll be able to put numbers on your calling list. And so I actually memorized, a whole bunch of phone numbers to put on that list. My parents, my brother, a couple friends, and stuff like that. And then I just remember that they actually, they took me out of that cell or where I was, and I just, I was talking to a correctional officer that was there, and he says to me, "What's your inmate number?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" And he sort of got annoyed with me. He was like, "Your inmate number, what's your inmate number?" And I was like, "I just got here. I have no idea what you're talking about." And he just looked at me, and he just started laughing hysterically. And he was just like, "A newbie, you'll get it really quick." And after that happened, I was put back into that holding cell, and then we were taken to a bunch of cells. And they had given me I had nothing, so they gave me a small care package, a little bit of deodorant and soap and toothpaste, which wasn't really toothpaste, and a toothbrush and
yes,
and all that. And I went inside. I was at the top bunk, which was really, really high, and I just went into my bunk and just didn't move. I just couldn't believe that I was there. It was just.
And that you had 10 months to.
Well, I didn't know. I mean, I was sentenced to 2 years, so they told me that I was going to have to serve the minimum a year before I was eligible to get out. So as far as I knew, I was going to be there for at least a year. And so I thought to myself, how am I going to do this for a year? For at least a year.
Yes.
And I ended up going to sleep. I mean, I didn't have anything. You needed a radio there was a TV, but you needed a radio to be able to hear the TV. And so it was probably 8:30 at night. I just went to sleep. And then I remember waking up and just this loud noise, and lights turned on. I figured it was 8 or 9 in the morning. It was 5 o'clock in the morning, and they were calling breakfast. So I was like, oh, well, might as well go to breakfast. And it was just this, I don't know, this spongy cake thing with oatmeal. And
oh boy!
It was just I was like, all right, I guess this is what I'm going to be eating most of the time.
Do you know if Matt's family agreed with your eventual sentence?
So I know the one thing that they pushed for is that they wanted my license to be suspended.
Your driver's license?
My driver's license.
Permanently, or?
No, I can't even remember. I want to say it was 5 years,
okay.
3 years, 5 years. But I guess in the end, they only ended up suspending my license. I thought it was going to be for a year, but when I got out of prison, I had my driver's license. So I don't know I don't know what happened with it, but I can remember that there was one of my court dates, and Matt's dad asked to speak, and I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified because, one, I had no idea that he was going to be speaking.
Okay.
And I had no idea what he was going to say.
Okay.
And he just wanted to make it known to the court that they wanted my license taken away.
Okay. Had you, maybe this question has been asked before, had you had any problems with the driving and vehicular misbehavior prior to the accident?
I'd had a ticket. I got a ticket, I think, when I was 17 for illegally passing. I had a speeding ticket think like a year after that. But that was, I wasn't like a chronic, I wasn't chronically getting pulled over by police or anything like that. There were times where I was guilty of driving too fast, but I mean, nowhere near the 101. I mean, when I had heard like 101 miles per hour, when I read that, I was like, this is how I found out. I read it like in the newspaper after I was arrested.
Yes.
And when I saw that, it just blew my mind. And I you know,
Do you dispute that? You don't think you were driving that fast?
I can't dispute it. I mean, the most likely scenario of what happened was that I had a brand new car. Mm-hmm. I was trying to show off.
Absolutely, yes.
And I was driving fast.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you that I was driving 101 miles per hour fast, because that doesn't seem in my character. That's just not, I've never been a high risk, thrill seeking like it's just not in my character.
Okay.
But I mean, if it says I was going 101, I was probably going 101. I mean, most likely I was going 101.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't, you know, I mean, I definitely don't dispute it. I mean, I don't agree with it 100%, but at the same time, I can't, I have no memory to dispute it. So it's the most likely scenario of what happened.
Now, when you were in prison, you were attacked. Why?
So, I was actually jumped twice, like gang style, while I was locked up. And I found out after the second time that I was locked up that the reason why I was locked up was because I had a high school diploma, I had a college education, and I articulated when I spoke. And it was funny because I actually found that out. It was probably like a couple weeks after the second time that it happened, and I was actually I was playing Scrabble in the common room with someone who, I mean, he was much older, so I don't know if he had been locked up for a long time or if, you know, he was just older, but he was probably in his late 50s, early 60s, and we're just randomly playing, and he was just like, I heard you got jumped. And I was literally like, I just freaked out. I had like this reaction that actually brought the common area to like a standstill. Like people were actually looking, like they weren't sure like if we were like fighting or what. Yeah. And I sort of played it off. I was just like, oh, like I can't believe you played that word. It was like amazing, you know, like just so that,
yes.
You know, no one, you know, really suspected anything. But that's when he said there were people who viewed you as walking around like you were better than everyone else, because you were educated, because you articulated when you spoke. And I just could not believe that, because I didn't cause, you know, confrontations with people. I mean, I kept to myself. There was probably a total of 8 people in that entire building, and there was probably 200, there were probably 200 inmates in that building. There were probably 8 that I associated myself with. But they all felt that I thought that I was better than everyone else, so they felt the need to beat it into me. So
you lost quite a bit this whole episode, right? Your career, your self-esteem to a large extent, certainly financially, your family and you, even your personal relationships have been impacted subsequent to that and even today. So Tell us a little bit about that.
I mean, you know, I guess the one thing that really helped me get through was, you know, like my parents, you know, like, and my twin brother. I mean, we were close before, but I think that after all this happened, I think it brought that to a whole another level. And I felt kind of bad that it, that was sort of the catalyst
Sure.
as to why that happened.
Sure.
And I sort of caused me to reflect in that I probably could have done a lot better in making us close. And so, but I lost relationships with people. I mean, I had, I have friends to this day, very close friends from high school. They helped me to get through it. But I lost relationships as well. There were people who just viewed me as basically a monster for what I had done, almost like that I had got in that car that day and decided that I was going to kill one of my best friends on purpose. It absolutely blew my mind. But you can't help the way that people feel. And so, there were those relationships, that I had lost, but nothing was more devastating than the relationships that I lost with Melissa and, Andrew and, her parents and their entire family.
Financially, you took a big hit.
The family had to pay for a lawyer. I had to pay over $3,000 in restitution to Andrew and his family for his unreimbursed medical bills as a result of the accident. Instead of having a pretty decent paying teaching job right after college, my first job was making $10 an hour. Working at a credit union, which is fine if you don't have $500-600 a month in student loans and stuff like that.
Yes,
so,
yes.
I mean, it took me a lot. I mean, like I said, I lost a lot, and it took a lot of effort for me, mentally and, just, financially, career-wise, just to get to where I am today. It's not anything that I'd ever wish upon anyone. It's just an incredible, just what I've been through. It's an incredible burden. You just knowing that you ended someone's life. Just knowing, just having to live with that, knowing that I'll probably have another, I don't know, 30, 40, I'm 35 years old, so I don't know how long I'm gonna to live for, but I'm gonna have to have that feeling for the rest of my life, and it's just it's terrible. It's just a terrible, awful feeling that I never wish upon anyone.
When did you learn you were getting out of prison, and how did that make you feel?
So, about 7 months in to being locked up, I actually got transferred I did the majority of my time up in Enfield Correctional Institute up in Enfield. And I ended up getting transferred 7 months in, and that place, it was just, it was horrible. People just sort of messed with my head. I made a legal call to my lawyer. I said, you gotta do whatever you can to get me out of here. So I gave him my tax return for the prior year, and that allowed me to do what was called a sentence modification that allowed me to go back in front of the judge that sentenced me. And so it was like, sometime in June, I went in front of the judge and I had my day in court, and my lawyer was like, these are the reasons why that he needs to be let out. And the judge interrupted him and said, I've heard enough. Mr. Graham, you're free to go. It was music to one of the happiest moments of my life, hearing those words.
Tell us about Impact. How did you get involved with Impact, and what is it?
So Impact stands for Mourning Parents Act, and it was founded by 3 moms who lost their teenage sons in car accidents within a 2 or 3 week span of each other back in December of 2002. And so we go around to high schools, driving schools, hospitals, and sort of share our stories with teenagers who are driving or about to be driving in hopes that, they'll never be in my position, that they'll never be in the position of one of these parents who lost a child in a car, in a motor vehicle accident. And so I found them back in, I think it was like late 2009, early 2010, and I've been going around speaking and sharing my stories with teens through Impact, that organization, for about the past 8 or 9 years.
Okay. What message would you leave with kids and young people and about responsibility and how a second can change your life forever?
I would say that the biggest thing that I've learned is that no one's invincible.
Okay.
I grew up my entire life thinking that I was invincible. It's funny because when I do like presentations at high schools,
Sure.
I'll like look into the crowd, and you'll always have like those handful of students that just don't care. They just have that look on their face of like, why am I here?
Yeah, right.
It's never going to end up being me. And I was one of those people who would go to those assemblies when I was in high school with that attitude.
Okay.
And I thought that I was invincible. Right up until that accident. And so my biggest thing that I tell everyone, and that what everyone needs to know, whether if you're 16 or if you're 60, you are not invincible.
All right. That's all the time we have for tonight's show. My thanks to my guest, David Graham. Everybody has a story. What's yours? Thank you for tuning in. Until next time, good night.